And we'll wait a second. And we'll see what we can do. There goes notification. I'm going to jump over here to YouTube really quick. Close that. Maybe if I can find it. There's the search. Theology, maybe if I can spell correctly, Central. There we are. Close that. How do we sound? Close that. Test 1, 2, 3, test 1, 2, 3. Maybe if I can find it. There's the... All right. Turn that off, and let's see what we can do. I'm going to go over here to Sermon Audio, go to Webcast. We are one of, well, there's two others broadcasting. Both of them have been on the air over 1 hour, so I'm assuming they're about to wrap up. That will place us in a prime spot. Nobody else broadcasting because most everyone is asleep, but that's okay. We are one of, well, there's two others broadcasting. So I'm assuming they're... All right, so they're about to be done. Do a refresh. And the map is not working. That's always wonderful. We'll get started here in just a second. All right, we're going to begin here in just a second, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not going to... The analytics aren't working. It shows nobody is listening. I know that can't be accurate because it should show 2 since I clicked on the YouTube link and on, oh, there it goes. There goes the 2. So it is working. It's just moving very, 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 very slowly. So I'll come back and look at that later and we'll figure that out. In the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, let's do this. I'm going to go right over here. All right, we're going to go live in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1.
Looking at our world from a theological perspective, this is the Theology Central Podcast, making theology central.
Good evening, everyone. It is Wednesday, February the 4th, 2026. It is currently 10:30 p.m. Central Time, and I'm coming to you live from the Theology Central studio located right here in Abilene, Texas. Now, I've spent, a number of hours here in the studio this evening, and I don't know how many times I've sat down right here in front of the microphone going, okay, let's listen to something. Let's do something. Let's do a broadcast. And I was like, well, we need to work on Ezekiel 28. Okay, I got that all ready to go, but I'm like, I don't know. Am I really ready to dig into Ezekiel 28 and all of the problems and difficulties that I have to work through? I was a little skeptical that that was in the right frame of mind. So I said, okay, let's not do that. Then I'm like, well, I really want to emphasize this 5 layers concept, and I want to do a lot of broadcasts working through passages of scripture on the 5 layers. But every time I think about doing that, well, whatever passage of scripture I'm looking at, it turns into, well, this could turn into 3, 4, 5, 6 parts. I don't really need to start another series. I'm trying to finish up all these other things. So I'm like, I don't know. Do I do that? I don't know. Do I do that? Well, then I'm like, well, let me watch some live church services broadcasting on Sermon Audio, some of the live Wednesday evening services. So I started watching some of those. I won't go through everything, but one of them caught my attention I was listening to because they went to, are you ready? Ezekiel 28. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. And of course, they went to Ezekiel 28. And well, I'm not going to go into everything they did. I bet you can pretty much guess how they handled Ezekiel 28. So I'm like, okay, well, maybe I should go live and do Ezekiel 28. I'm like, no, nah, I don't think I'm in the right frame of mind. So I started looking around, and then I stumbled upon a fascinating series on the Sermon Audio app. It started last February. So it's been going on for a year. And the title of the series is Unlocking Hebraic Bible Idioms. Unlocking Hebraic Bible Idioms. They have done 27 messages where they're working through the Bible, looking at all the major Hebraic idioms. And I was like, oh, wow, this looks good. Man, I need to tell everyone about this. So I thought about doing a quick episode, telling everyone about it and playing part of the first episode. But then I'm like, wait a minute. If I do that, I've got audio already queued up in my studio software. I would have to delete that, upload this, and then later go back, and I'm not going to do that because everyone knows what audio I already have queued up. And that's the farewell lecture from Bart Ehrman. Remember, he announced his retirement, that after 37 years of being a teacher there at Chapel Hill, he was going to step down and be, unemployed come January. He's still going to speak. He's still going to write books. But as far as his in-classroom teaching, Bart Ehrman is done. And so I created a series about this. I did my first episode was all about the life of Bart Ehrman, his influence, and the major challenges he left the church. And then in the second episode, we started reviewing his farewell address, his farewell lecture. And he's entitling this lecture really as the most significant discovery in Bible scholarship and Bible study and Bible criticism in the last, 30 years, 40 years, maybe ever. And so I'm like, okay, what does he think is the greatest discovery? All right. So we started reviewing his lecture, and he started talking about textual variants. And he talked about the number of textual variants, and we talked about them, and are they significant? Are they insignificant? How to understand them? I tried to give you a balanced perspective. He made some claims about the Gospel of Matthew. I went through the fragments we have from the Gospel of Matthew, and then where we finally have kind of a completed copy of Matthew that shows up around 300 AD from two basically major manuscripts. And so we talked about that. I know I'm simplifying everything. So we went through all of that, and right as he was finishing up the section on textual variants, I'm like, okay, we've been broadcasting about an hour. It's time to stop. So that I thought, well, I haven't really accomplished anything this evening. And if I don't accomplish anything this evening, I'm going to toss and turn all night. I've got to do something. So I'm like, it's already queued up. Oh yeah, I want to listen to those Hebraic Bible or biblical idioms. I want to listen to those Hebraic Bible idioms. But before I start working on that, because that could turn into a series in and of itself, before I do that, I've got to finish up this lecture from Bart Ehrman. We have to. We got to finish this up. So I'm like, this is a decent time to do so. And just remember how I do the reviews. I don't listen to these things first, right? I'm going into this just as blind as you are. So the only thing I know is we've listened to a considerable amount of time, and he's talked about textual variants. And I think I did a pretty good job helping you understand the significance of that, but trying to do so in a balanced way. All right. So we did that. Now, well, where is he going to go next in his lecture? Is he going to tell us finally what the most important discovery is? And I told you to write it down what you think he's going to say, but we're going to find out together. I backed up the audio just a little bit. He's finishing up his section on textual variants. So as he finishes this up, we will advance. I'll react in real time. And remember, it means when I'm reacting in real time, it means that's what it means. I don't have anything all mapped out, notes and research. So sometimes maybe I'm looking something up. Maybe I'll throw something out there and then have to return to it in a minute after I'm looking for different things. But I like doing this. It's organic. It's real. So it's basically like, hey, it's It's a little after 10:30 p.m. Central Time. Hey, let's listen to a Bart Ehrman lecture. In fact, his farewell lecture. And let's listen together and think about it, talk about it. Let's just have a good evening, wrap up this day listening to Bart Ehrman and discussing textual criticism and significant issues that relates to that particular field. A lot I could say, but there you go. That sets everything up. That's what I've been doing. And so I need to finish this up. I don't think we can finish this lecture in this episode. I think it's going to take a third episode to do this. So I'm not going to worry about time. I'll stop whenever I feel like I want to stop or when I find a good stopping place. If that stopping place comes way quick, then we'll stop right there. And then tomorrow we'll pick it up. So are you ready? Bart Ehrman, a little late night listening to a lecture. I know this is what you love listening to late at night, but hey, it's worth your time. Are you ready? Here we go.
And the recent estimates are around 500,000 differences. Having said that, most of these differences simply show that ancient scribes could spell no better than students can today.
Now, if you didn't hear the first part, what he did is he talked about going back to the 1700s, where someone took 100 manuscripts and then noted there was like 30,000 variants. I think there was 30,000. I think that's the original number. And that sounds crazy. A lot of people got mad, kind of basically blamed that man for like being a tool of Satan. But he's like, I'm not being a tool of Satan. I'm just pointing out the variants that exist. And this is very important to realize. The more manuscripts we discover, the more variants we get. And it's kind of like a double-edged sword. You want as many manuscripts as possible because the more manuscripts you have, you can take this manuscript, this manuscript, this manuscript and go, well, there's a lot of agreement here, giving us some level of certainty, giving us some sense of assurance that what we have here probably reflects what's in the original. Now, remember, we do not have the originals. We do not have the original. So all we do is we have copies upon copies upon copies upon copies. You put those copies together and you have to then try to just think, okay, I think this would have been close to what the originals would have had. But with every manuscript discovered, you get variants. Many of and now we have over 5,000, over 5,800, I don't remember the exact number currently, of manuscripts dealing with the New Testament. And that gives you some number of variants that's like, it's insane. We've got more variants than we have words in the New Testament. Many of those variants are insignificant. And that's fine, and that's okay to state, but do not underestimate that there are some variants that are of great significance, and they impact things. And I know Christians like to minimize that, but you can't. They're there. On one hand, you don't want to overstate the significance of the variants. On the other hand, you can't just ignore it, downplay it, and pretend like everything is wonderful because that's not fair either. You have to deal with the reality that we are confronted with. And that's what he's wrapping up right here in this section of his lecture.
You misspell a word, it's a difference. So most of them don't matter, but some of them matter a lot. Some of them actually change what a verse means, or what a chapter means, or what a book means. Sometimes they change the theology of the whole thing. It's, that really does matter. But that's not the most significant discovery in the history of biblical scholarship.
Okay, those textual variants are not the most significant discovery in Bible scholarship. So what is the most significant discovery? Now, I feel bad just leaving the textual variants, but our entire last episode was all about textual variants. So you can go listen to that, and well, if we need to return to that subject, we can at some other time. We need to get to what is the most significant discovery in the history of Bible scholarship. What do you think? Write it down. What do you think he's going to say? It's not textual variants. And again, everyone should know about textual variants, everyone. And I'm going to go back and start reteaching the last episode. I can't do that, all right? So what is it going to be? Any guesses? Come on, I want your guesses. Take a screenshot with a timestamp. What is your guess? What is the most significant discovery in Bible scholarship ever? Well, let's find out.
The findings of archaeology. Both Old Testament and New Testament are texts that people read and study and analyze, but at some point people realize, there probably should be some evidence that these things happened, like material evidence, like archaeological evidence. Well, like what? Well, in the ancient history of Israel, we have the account in the Old Testament, the book of Exodus, of the children of Israel becoming enslaved by the Egyptians for centuries and growing to be a great people. And then God raises up Moses to bring them out of their slavery in Egypt. And God works miracles through Moses. And so they escape from Egypt. They go through the Sea of Reeds, or called the Red Sea. And they escape, and the entire Egyptian army is destroyed in the map. And they escape. And we're told that there were 600,000 of these Israelites who were military-age men. So it's not counting women, not counting children, not counting the elderly. So we're talking 2.5 or 3 million people. Okay, well, that's a big event. And after that, 40 years later, they're instructed by God to go in and take over the Promised Land. And so the land of Canaan, they're to go in, and they are to destroy all the cities there and all the people there. And we're told that they did. Happens in the book of Joshua, beginning with the Battle of Jericho, where the walls come tumbling down, and the children of Israel are commanded to go into the city, and with the walls falling down, and they go in and they slaughter every man, woman, and child in the city. But it was a big walled city, massive population. So, okay, that's a big event. So with big events like this, you kind of think there might be some archaeological evidence that they happened. And then after that, you start getting kingdoms, right? You get the King David, who, young in life, slayed Goliath. He was the second king of Israel. His son Solomon built the temple. Okay, so you've got stuff that happened in the past, and archaeologists dig up what happened in the past. There had been some interest in material culture for a while. In the first half of the 20th century, there started being a broader interest by people who were particularly interested in the Bible in finding remains of things that are described in the Bible, just to verify what was in the Bible. And so they call themselves biblical archaeologists. So, archaeologists is anybody who digs anywhere for, ancient stuff. Biblical archaeologists, people like William F. Albright, who was a brilliant person, and had as one of his missions in life to find verification of the biblical accounts by digging in Israel. Early on, it looked like they were finding stuff that verified things like the destruction of the cities of Canaan by the Israelites in the 13th century BCE. 13th century BCE. But over time, archaeologists developed more rigorous methods of engaging in their work. And they dug more carefully and more systematically and started looking more critically, not to verify the biblical accounts, not to invalidate them either way. They just want to see what happened based on the archaeological evidence, and it wasn't good for those who were interested in verifying the Bible because.
Okay, now this is where controversy can erupt, all right? Depending on sources you look at, a lot of Bible handbooks, a lot of Bible study material will try to provide, hey, here's some archaeological evidence that confirms this. Here's some biblical archaeological evidence that confirms this. Here's the frustrating part, and this really does bother me. So many times, even within, and usually within Christendom, there's a lot of times they will make lots of claims about a supposed archaeological discovery. And what Christians do, if it's published in a Bible handbook, or if it's published in a Christian book, or it's on a Christian YouTube channel, they don't do any verifying, checking. No. It's just true. And many times Christians will then share this information. Oh, they found evidence of this. They found evidence of this. And in many cases, you do a little bit of research and you come to find out that the claims are absolutely fraudulent. Even Answers in Genesis, I think at one point had to put out an article about claims about archaeological evidence proving the Exodus and had to say this is not accurate and this is not true. You have to be very, 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 very careful where you're getting your information and trying to ensure that it's accurate. And this is why, first, if you are a Christian trying to use archaeological evidence to prove to people that the Bible is true, that the Bible is accurate, that the Bible is historical fact, then the last thing you want to do is put forth evidence that someone within a little bit of extra time can come back and prove to you that your evidence is fraudulent. Because if you're using fraudulent evidence to try to prove that the Bible is true, then it seems to demonstrate that all you have is fraudulent evidence because there is no actually good evidence. It is better to say nothing until you know, here's the archaeological find. All right, what has everyone said about this? What are all the different claims about this archaeological find? When was the find originally discovered? And what have people said and published about that discovery in the last 20, 30, 40 years? Because in many cases, it comes back saying, well, that's not as... we're not as sure now as we thought we were. Well, now that we kind of look at it, that wasn't true, or no, that wasn't accurate. And almost inevitably, when I say something like this, I'll get some link to a YouTube video. See, they discovered this under the Red Sea. And then after 5 seconds of researching said video, you find out it's a fraud, it's a fake. And it's like, why do Christians do this? Christians fall for this so easily. And you know why? When you want something to be true, any evidence that seems to support it, you just immediately accept that evidence just without any discernment. It doesn't matter. Look, what we want is truth. If that truth confirms what's in the Bible, great. If that truth does not confirm what's in the Bible, in fact, if the truth actually goes against evidence that seems to support the Bible, whatever is the truth, that's what you should be concerned about. Truth, accuracy, not propaganda. Not just to win an argument. It's not about winning arguments. It's about pursuing truth. So you have to be very careful. You have to be. As soon as Bart Ehrman says that, you'll have Christians within 5 seconds. No, they discovered this. And they'll say it like it's like absolute fact. And you'll be like, oh, really? Well, give me that information. You'll do like 45, sometimes 45 seconds worth of searching. You're like, you do realize nobody accepts this. Well, I believe it. Of course you believe it. Of course. Because it confirms what you already believe. So that's not the way we do. That's not how we search for truth. We don't search for truth. Oh, what if I can give you an article that says that it proves that the Bible is false? Well, I don't agree with that. Well, then, you know what? If you've already made up your mind and no evidence is not going to impact you one way or the other, then how about just forget the evidence and just say, I've already made up my mind. But no, you want a little bit of evidence so that you can argue with an atheist to try to show an atheist that they're wrong. But in many cases, that atheist is going to take your information, go look it up, and they're going to come back going, you're a liar. And if you appear to be a liar, then I'm sorry, you're going to have a hard time arguing the truth of Christianity when you're proven to be a liar. Now, I know you're not trying to lie, but you've got to make sure the information you have is accurate. All right. Now, let me make this very clear. No archaeological evidence does not mean the Bible is not true. It just means there's no archaeological evidence to confirm what's in Scripture. All right? We've got to make that very clear. The absence of it doesn't necessarily prove it's not true. It may be problematic. It may be uncomfortable. And you know what? If there is no archaeological evidence, we just have to own it and we just have to admit it instead of trying to formulate some garbage claim on some crazed website that's filled with 900 other conspiratorial, nonsense. We cannot do that.
As it turns out, there is not a single piece of archaeological evidence that there was an Exodus. Period. You ain't going to find any chariots at the bottom of the Red Sea. They ain't there.
Now, when Christians hear that, they lose their minds. But almost all sources say, for the book of Exodus, as described in the Bible, millions leaving Egypt, plagues, mass wilderness wanderings, conquest of Canaan, there is currently no direct archaeological evidence confirming it happened that way. Now, it is also important there is no direct evidence disproving every possible historical, claim either. There's just some cases that we just don't have any evidence. All right. So I think we have to at least consider that. All right. Yeah, and I could go through, and I've got a number of things here about different sites, and yeah. So most archaeologists and historians, including many Christian ones, say the biblical narrative is theological storytelling, not modern history writing. Now, I don't like to say it's theological storytelling. I would not say that. But what I would say is I believe it's historical narrative, but at the same time, I would have to say I'm taking that and believing that by faith because I don't have any archaeological evidence that can 100% prove and confirm that. And typically evidence presented by some Christians have been proven to be completely fraudulent and not true. Now, you may not like that, and your pastor may tell you different, but I don't care. Go do your own research on this and see what you can find, all right? And even artificial intelligence, this is what artificial intelligence says. When Bart Ehrman says that there is not a single piece of archaeological evidence for the Exodus, that is mostly true for the large-scale biblical account. AI says it may be slightly overstated because absence of evidence equals proof nothing happened. It doesn't work that way. In other words, just because you have the absence of evidence is not proof that it did not happen. AI says the more precise way of wording it would be there is no archaeological evidence supporting the Exodus as described in the Bible. AI says that's the academically careful version and the correct way to state it. All right, so AI may think Bart Ehrman may slightly overstates it, but when it comes down to the facts, there isn't any archaeological evidence. And all claims about it have typically proven to be embarrassing, a hoax, a fraud, and guess who buys into it? Inevitably, it is Christians who buy into it. It is Christians. And that, to me, is the most embarrassing things because the people who should have the most rigorous demand for facts and accuracy and truth without any fluctuation should be Christians, even if that evidence goes against what we want to find. Because we're supposed to be about truth and accuracy, not about misrepresenting or misleading or deception or, no, it should be like, no, here's the thing. And I'm sorry, there's just no archaeological evidence. That's not, put it this way, and if anyone says there is, well, then let's get that evidence and let's get it peer reviewed. Let's get it to the major archaeological journals. Send it in. Come on, challenge it. Take it to the academia. Let's get it challenged. Let's get it tested. Let's get it verified. Yeah, that's what I thought. In most cases, that's when it falls apart.
There 2.5 to 3 million people wandering around in the wilderness. There's not a single potsherd that's been found. And people have looked. And the destruction of Jericho and the other cities, it turns out Jericho may not have even been inhabited at the time. If it was inhabited, it was a small settlement and there were no walls. What's going on here? Well, what's going on here is, what's going on here? Right, what's going on here? What's going on here is that these accounts are not historical as described in the Bible. They're probably not historical as described in the Bible. But as you just saw, this too is not the most significant discovery of biblical studies.
And even AI confirms that Jericho was likely unfortified, barely inhabited at the supposed conquest date. Now, you may not like that, and you may disagree with that. You just have to understand at some point you have to say, look, there comes a level, there comes a point where we can take all the evidence that we do have, right? And say, okay, this gives me some level of assurance. This gives me some level of confidence. But there comes a point in Christianity where you're going to say, I'm taking the rest of this by faith. I'm taking it by faith, and maybe one day the archaeological evidence will be found, because there have been times that there have been claims that there's no archaeological evidence, and then later, and lo and behold, they do find it. Not in every single case. So sometimes all we can do is acknowledge by faith. But so that we're believing something by faith. And it's okay to say that, because sometimes that's all we can say. So according to Bart Ehrman, textual variants, not the greatest discovery in biblical scholarship. Archaeological evidence, or the lack thereof, not the greatest discovery in biblical scholarship. So what is the greatest discovery in biblical scholarship? What do you think it is? Well, let's find out.
All right, so what is? The discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls. We have for long had very limited knowledge about Judaism in the days of Jesus. We have very limited, it's strange how little evidence we've had, because most of our Jewish evidence about the ancient world comes from Jewish writings that were produced hundreds of years later. The Mishnah, the Talmud, and people had some ideas. We have some, of course. We have Jewish sources from the time of Jesus, especially the Jewish historian Josephus and other things. But we had fairly limited knowledge. But then a hugely significant discovery was made in 1947. In 1947, the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered. They were discovered by accident. But when they were discovered, it was quite significant. They were discovered in a community, near a community that's now called Qumran, spelled with a Q, Qumran, which is, it's to the sort of northwest area of northwest of the Dead Sea. So they're called the Dead Sea Scrolls. The first discovery was of a cave that had a jar that had scrolls in it. And once they found this jar of scrolls, and they wondered if these other caves, lots of caves around, hundreds of caves around there. They started exploring caves. They ended up finding 11 caves that had scrolls in them. Some of them were fairly complete scrolls. I mean, the Isaiah scroll is magnificent. It's a copy of Isaiah that is 1,000 years earlier than the copy we were relying on up till then. 1,000 years earlier. So people were copying Jewish manuscripts, so we did Christian manuscripts, but we didn't have the intervening manuscripts, right? We had this thing from the year 1000, and now all of a sudden, whoa, we got this thing from Isaiah. So they found some amazing scrolls in 11 of the caves. There are 11 caves that had scrolls in them, and they vastly improved our understanding of first century Judaism because of the kinds of things they were. They were biblical manuscripts, which had, every book of the Hebrew Bible was discovered, at least a fragment of the book, or the whole thing, was discovered, except for the book of Esther, as it turns out. And other writings too, though. There were commentaries on these books that showed you what this Jewish community, it turns out it was a Jewish community that were gathering manuscripts, producing manuscripts. And we could find out how they were interpreting the Bible, what their methods of interpretation were, which we didn't have good access to before. We have books of Psalms. They wrote Psalms and recorded Psalms. They have books that would describe how their community was to be organized and how they behave together in their community, rules for the community to describe how this Jewish community was functioning at the time. We have a description of a war that was soon going to take place. It was going to be the war to end all wars. The apocalyptic end of time was going to come, and we have a scroll that describes it. These scrolls are just absolutely fantastic for enlightening us about one aspect of Judaism that we had very little knowledge of before. And so hugely important, but also for the relevance for understanding Jesus. Because these scrolls embody a worldview about the coming judgment of God against this world that's going to happen very soon to destroy all those who are opposed to God and bring in a good world that God had planned from the beginning. It's very much like the teachings of Jesus. At the same time, in roughly the same area. It's not that Jesus belonged to this community, but it set the context within which to put Jesus' proclamation. Hugely significant. But not the most significant discovery.
Okay. I thought he kind of gave a hint that it was the greatest discovery, but the Dead Sea Scrolls, not the greatest discovery. He kind of played a little. I thought that's what he was. At the very beginning, it made it sound like, oh, no, so what is? And then he said the Dead Sea Scrolls. So I thought that was his answer. But nope, the Dead Sea Scrolls, not the greatest discovery in Bible scholarship. Now, the Dead Sea Scrolls are massively significant. I don't know, especially that Isaiah scroll that was complete. And yeah, there's a lot of discussion about how that it gives us great assurance in many cases about the book of Isaiah, and that what we have, we're pretty confident with. So, yeah, I mean, we could get into a big discussion there. So, but, yeah, all right. I thought that was I even started typing out, Bart Ehrman thinks the Dead Sea Scrolls is the greatest discovery in Bible scholarship. And there was a part of me that was like, well, that's kind of a letdown. That seems too on the nose. I was like, a lot of people would say that. I was like, that's not really that significant. It's the way he's building this up, I think it's got to be something that I'm not thinking of. Dead Sea Scrolls, I was like, wait, that's it? Well, okay. All right. For your farewell lecture, this is pretty standard stuff, right? Textual variants, biblical archaeology that in many cases doesn't give us the confirmation we want. And then the Dead Sea Scrolls, which adds a lot of clarity and understanding of the times and of Jesus and of Judaism. Okay, great. We've got some very important manuscripts. Okay, great. All right. To say that's the most important one, I'd be like, okay, yeah, well, all right. Well, thanks for listening. So if it's not that, then what is the greatest discovery? That confused me a little bit because I already started typing out that I thought, oh, wait, that's it? Okay, well, I set this up as something big and it sounds like I've been let down. So now I'm confused. So what is it? Well, at least I'm excited that it's not the Dead Sea Scrolls, even though I think those are of great significance. I want him to give us something that will kind of go, wait, what? That's the greatest discovery? So let's find out what it is.
All right. That's the prologue. The single most discovery I'm now going to tell you, but I'm going to tell you first, it's going to seem rather banal. Minor, uninteresting, not exactly headline news, but it revolutionized the field. And it forever changed our understanding of the Jewish and Christian scriptures. It is that the Bible's not a single book. The most important discovery, I'm going to argue, is this. Let me explain why this rather banal observation has made such a huge impact. The reality of the canon.
Okay, now that I would not have that written down. So the greatest discovery, according to Bart Ehrman, for biblical scholarship, is that the Bible is not one single book. It's not a single book. All right? Now, I got to struggle a little bit here. Now, I don't know if he's being somewhat hyperbolic because to me, this is just my thinking here, that to say it's the most significant discovery in biblical studies, I think is not completely accurate because I don't think it's much of a discovery. This is my own personal feelings, right? I think it's a hermeneutical realization. It's something that, and from a hermeneutical perspective, has been realized and understood for centuries. Now, I think maybe within the church reading is very much they treat the Bible as a single book. To say the Bible is not a single book is very antithetical to church speak, to church. I don't think it's antithetical to proper hermeneutics. I think in church, it's inevitably, hey, it's a single book and you can just grab this verse and connect it to this verse and connect it to this verse and just grab it to this verse. And, oh, I'm going to grab a little bit from Hebrew poetry. I'm going to grab from apocalyptic literature. I'm going to grab a little bit from a lament. I'm going to grab from a historical narrative, and I'm going to group them together and say, boom, scripture with scripture, because it's a single book. Hermeneutically, you're looking at the people going, are you people out of your ever-living mind? What are you doing? But Christians do this all the time. And Bible scholarship, they'd be like, oh, we're in church. Yeah, okay, yeah, well, all right, we'll play the little game. All right? So when Bart Ehrman says the Bible is not a single book, this is what I'm going to give you kind of what I hear. Now, he will explain it. And so maybe I'm wrong, but what I hear, he's saying these are 66 separate writings, 66 separate books. They're written by different authors. These are historical facts. They're different books, different authors. They're written in completely different times. They're written to completely different audiences. They're written with different emphasis, different perspective, different teachings. And I think in sometimes you have to at least acknowledge there seems to be conflict between them. So I think it's historical. I think it's textual, undeniable. I think historically and textually, it's undeniable. Genesis, Isaiah, Paul, John, that's not one author, that's not one voice. Those are different authors, different voices to different audiences for different reasons. And I think Christians know this. I think Christians have known this. I think academically minded Christians, hermeneutically minded Christians, but church destroys this kind of deep understanding to dumb things down to kind of a spiritual version of things. And it's sometimes so counter to actual thought and scholarship. Let's see how Bart Ehrman handles this.
Canon of Scripture refers to the books that are all together in Scripture. You have a canon of Shakespeare, you got a canon of the Hebrew Bible, canon of New Testament, canon of Scripture, all the books in there. We have 66 books in the Christian Bible, 39 in the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, 27 in the New Testament. So 66 books written, by different authors to different audiences at different times, telling different narratives, with different teachings, holding different views, presupposing different perspectives. They're often at odds with each other. They often have implausible statements in them and histories in them. And themselves are often made up of different sources, written by different authors to different audiences at different times, that have been combined together into one book. You've got 66 of these books, but people treat them as a book because they're between two covers.
Okay, so I'm pretty close to what I said, all right? Pretty close. When I hear that, hermeneutically, I'm like, I'm with this all day. Like hermeneutically, I'm like, you're right. 66 different books. You've got to understand what's going on in that book. You've got to understand who it's to, what its purpose, how it's using language, how it's using symbolism, what it's trying to do, what it's trying to say. You don't just reach in and grab and go, oh, I'm going to connect it to a verse over here. I'm going to connect it to a verse over here. Now, the only difference is where I would start disagreeing with Bart Ehrman is ultimately I believe that the Bible is inspired by God and that God is the ultimate author of all of it, right? But at the same time, hermeneutically, I have to say this was written by this individual at this particular time, in this particular situation, addressing this particular problem, trying to accomplish this particular thing. Like when I go to Isaiah 40 through 55, that's written to give comfort to people who are experiencing a specific thing. I can't just then say, oh, here's infant baptism. Oh, wait, here's the church. And just start just doing weird things with it as if it just can connect to any part. No. Even if I believe all the individual books are inspired by God, I believe that book is inspired by God, but it's specific to a specific person and a specific situation. Because they've been collected together, we have to talk about the ramifications of them being collected together. It's not like God dropped a list down from heaven and said, here's the 66 books. Okay, when we talk about the formation of the canon, we have a whole host of issues to struggle with. But I think one of the biggest hermeneutical mistakes is how pastors just treat the Bible like you can just randomly link verses together in some weird like, ooh, let's just grab a little of this and let's just put it together. See, it proves my point. And it's like, that literally proves nothing. In many cases, I don't even know how you link those together. And I get those kind of emails or comments on YouTube all the time. Oh, you forgot about this verse. Wait, what? How are you connecting that to that? It has nothing to do with it. You're connecting two books separated by 2,000 years, different problem. What are you doing? And sometimes it can get frustrating. You just like, look, I know you went to church, but for crying out loud, that's not how you do Bible scholarship or study in any meaningful way. That's how you do whacked out devotionals. That's different. That's a whole different world than biblical scholarship.
That's a problem. It looks like one book. And when you read a book, you expect it to be consistent. It doesn't occur to you that the author's going to flat out contradict himself in the next page. You don't expect it, and if you don't expect it, you don't look for it. If you don't look for it, you don't see it. Once you realize it's 66 books, oh boy, does that open up things in a huge way. And I want to illustrate that. I want to illustrate it. I'm going to start in the beginning. Genesis chapters 1 and 2. So, this last week, I was talking to one of my students in one of my classes who was an evangelical, a self-professed evangelical church-going guy who was also a neuroscience major. And he wanted to know how he can take Genesis 1 literally. How is it possible? Because he's unwilling to give up the idea that it's literally true because he's an evangelical Christian, but he's also a scientist. And it doesn't seem right. So is it a metaphor? But if you say it's a metaphor, where do if you say one thing's a metaphor, not really literally true, where do you draw the line? Like, that's just the first book. It's the first chapter of the first book. What about the second chapter? What about, the 9th chapter? What about the next book? I mean, where do you draw the line? He was worried about it. And it's a very good question. Can you take it as literally true, Genesis chapter 1?
Now, I do agree with him. It does, hermeneutically, you run into problems. Well, if I can't take that literal, if that's a metaphor, well, what do I do here? What do I do here? And we run into those problems hermeneutically. And every Christian should be wrestling and struggling with these things. But let me just make it very clear that I think if you go back to Origen and Jerome of the early church fathers, they already discussed, I think in their writings, I think it's fair to say, hey, we've got multiple authors, we've got different styles, we have tensions that seems to be between these texts. Luther openly talked about how James conflicted with Paul and that some books had different theological emphasis. All right. And in especially modern scholarship, I think there's been lots of discussion and debate about this. So when Bart Ehrman says this is the greatest discovery, I think this has been talked about forever. I think once again, here's what we have to separate: scholarship, in-depth study, taking the text apart, wrestling with it, dealing with it, and church. Church is not scholarship. It's the enemy of it. Right? It's this spiritualized, devotional, emotional experientialism that doesn't want to deal with all of this. The average person in the pew doesn't want to deal with all of these problems and textual issues and, well, what do we do with this text? No, they just want to here's my theological team, and my theological team is going to make it simple and easy and give me 3 points, make it feel like I felt Jesus. I got some more moralism. I'm going to be a good person, and we're going to get to the buffet by noon. But when you start digging in, oh man, you run into problems. You run into difficulties, and you go, what in the world do I do? Now let's see. We won't go much further, but we'll just see if he says anything else about this. We've got to find a good stopping point, but now we know what the greatest discovery is. And you may not, and again, he even acknowledged that you're probably going to think it's insignificant. But when you think of the Bible, do you think of one book or do you think of 66 individual books? Now, whatever you think about it being one and God being the author, I understand that. But you need to hear me hermeneutically. When you do in-depth study, you have to see the books first and foremost as an individual book to a specific person, specific situation, addressing specific issues at a specific time. You've got to see that context.
What I do with my students, by the way, is when I'm teaching Hebrew Bible, which luckily my Hebrew Bible colleagues who are here will attest is it's a good thing I'm not doing that, but it's not my main field. But when I do teach Hebrew Bible, I simply have my students do a very basic exercise that I recommend you all do. Just read Genesis 1 and list everything that happens in order, then read Genesis 2, which is also part of the creation account, and list everything that happens in order. Just do it. Compare your lists. Okay. Yeah, good luck. So the basic sequence in Genesis 1 is fine. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And then you have a sequence of days. There was evening, there was morning, the first day. Then you have the second day, and God puts this firmament in the sky, and down below, and then the third day, and he separates the water so dry land appears, and then plants appear. The fourth day, and you go through these days one after the one, and actually the basic sequence ain't bad. You got light, okay? Think Big Bang. You get land before you get plants. You get plants before you get animals. You get animals before you get humans. Pretty good, right? Not bad. But 6 days? People say, yeah, it wasn't really days. If it wasn't really days, why does he say evening and morning the first day? Right? He's not talking about geological periods here. It's evening and morning the first day, but there are problems with that too. Because you have evenings and mornings before the sun's created. The sun's not created till the fourth day. How's that supposed to work that you have evening and morning before the first day? Before the fourth. And you have the plants created on the third day before the sun's created. What happened to photosynthesis here? And this guy's a scientist. He's saying, I'm not, oh my God. And you have light created the first day before you have a sun, moon, and stars. What? Okay, so, moreover, you got Genesis 2.
Now, all of these issues, let me make it very clear, all of these difficulties, all of these issues, this should be common to be discussed, struggled with, stumbling over, trying to figure it out in church. It should not be, oh, wait. Let me get some Christian books. Okay, here's a simple answer. Okay, it makes sense, right? Okay, amen. Oh, and anybody who questions this, they're just idiots and they're just stupid. And if they really read the Bible, okay, they're all dumb, right? We're smarter than all of them, right? Okay, good. And then that's the way Christians typically handle it. It should be, well, we got a lot to work on here. And it's difficult. And there's not always simple, easy answers. All right? There's not. And sometimes trying to work through it is complicated. I've had people ask some of these questions. I had someone who was going to a university and their science teacher was tearing this all apart. Because, I mean, they basically, look, if you're going to pursue a degree in science, you got to get rid of this creation nonsense. And so I tried my best to try to explain it to the best of my ability, but even acknowledge how complicated and convoluted it can become, because it's not always simple and straightforward, and not the way Christians like to make it. But that means you've got to struggle with it and try to figure it out and try to, oh man, okay. Yeah, let me make this list. Let's make another list. Okay. Like, do your observational work, and wherever that observational work leads you, live with it. Don't just simply see, the first part is you're just doing observational work, noting the problems, not trying to immediately go in trying to clean up the problems. No, just acknowledge sometimes, whoa, what is going on here?
This is where Adam and Eve are created. Humans are created in Genesis 1, male and female. He, created them in Genesis 1 on the sixth day before he rested on the seventh. But what about Genesis 2? Well, it also has a sequence of creation, you can see for yourself, in which the humans are not created the last thing, they're created the first thing. The first thing God creates is Adam before there are any plants. Wait a second. The plants and animals in Genesis 2 are created after Adam. So first of all, that doesn't work in Genesis 1. Second of all, it can't be right. But you only know that, or you're only willing to see that, or only willing to admit that, if you realize that the author of Genesis has somehow taken two different stories from two different authors written at two different times for two different reasons and plucked them together. You put them together, then you get Genesis 1 and 2, and you got problems. You got problems with both of them individually, and now you got problems with the sequence. So the problem is people want to harmonize them and make them say the same thing. But if you make them say the same thing, then they're not saying what they actually say. They're saying something else. So that's not good, because it means that what Genesis 1 describes is now compromised with what Genesis 2 describes, so it isn't describing what it actually describes. If humans are created last, and you say they're also created first, how's that work exactly? So they're either, you either compromise them or they're just both wrong if you harmonize them. All right, well, why does it matter?
Now, I know immediately people are going to go try to find some commentary. You're going to Answers in Genesis. You're going to try to find the simplest answer to try to harmonize them. And look, people do try to harmonize them. Most scholars call them Genesis 1, verse 1 to Genesis 2, 3 as account A. That the first account of creation goes from Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 to chapter 2, verse 3. Remember, the chapter breaks were not there originally. All right. Now, everyone will acknowledge that. Even Dr. Bart Ehrman would acknowledge that. So some say the first account goes from chapter 1, verse 1 to chapter 2, verse 3. The second account begins in chapter 2, verse 4 and goes to verse 25. Most scholars argue they come from different not different translations, different traditions or different sources. And sometimes they label them, like P and J. But you don't even need a source theory to try to see the issue. You can just read the order of events, right? If you look at Genesis chapter 1, look at the structured, look at the 7 days, look at the order: light, sky, land, sun, moon, animals, land, animals, humans, God, rest, all right? Genesis 2, the order, like the earth exists, but no plants. God forms man, plants a garden kind of planted, animals created and brought to Adam, woman created last. All right? So if you put them side by side, you get some tensions, right? Now, here's the thing. How do we understand this? What do we do? Do we simply try to harmonize them? Do we see them as possibly two different stories placed together, right? And if we do, does that create a problem? How do we understand this? All right. So, there's a lot more we could say, but okay. And this doesn't really go to his greatest discovery as reading these as individual books, but I do believe that what he's demonstrating is, and I think this is the most important thing. And I will say this, when we open the Bible, and I'm going to be very dogmatic here. When we open the Bible and we come to a text, we have a tendency to go to the text looking for like a devotional, like a Bible study so that I can learn something. Or we're looking for a sermon or a Sunday school lesson or a small group lesson. We kind of approach it from that kind of mind. What is God going to give me today? What am I going to learn? How am I going to grow as a Christian? What am I going to be convicted by? We go to it in a very practical way, right? And the way we have to learn to approach the text is, this is the text before me today, and I'm going to do work on observation, not trying to get a lesson, not trying to get a devotional, not trying to get a word from God. I'm going to observe what's there. And whatever I discover, I'm going to just be, if it makes sense, it makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, if it appears to be contradictory, if it seems to be confusing, if it seems to be all discombobulated, then I will acknowledge that. The goal is to work on the text. The goal is not to go to the text, simply to use the text for my own spiritual purposes. The text is not there for your spiritual purpose. The text is there to be observed and to be worked upon, to be sought to understood based on what it says, not what you need for your devotional time. And that's a different mindset, and many Christians don't understand that and how they approach the text. If you approach it from an observational standpoint, you're just going to be like, well, whoa, man, okay, well, I do got a sequence problem here, and I don't know what to do. But most Christians don't care about that. Oh, my devotional thought, God is creator. That's my devotional thought. Okay, that's great for a devotion. Doesn't mean you understand anything about Genesis 1 and 2 or any of the possible problems that have been talked about for 2,000 years. But you're not going to hear about it talked about in church because the church is there to hide all of the problems.
If you're interested in understanding the Bible, it's important because it shows that there are things, this one example begins to show that there are problems with understanding the Bible as descriptions of things that actually happened in the past. Some of the Bible did happen. The world did come into existence. Plants did occur on the planet, and there are animals that appeared, and humans did appear. So there are things that happened, yes, but not necessarily as described in Genesis 1 and 2. In part, you can see that there are things that happened that are not actually as described simply by noting the contradictions. The point of the contradictions is not so you can go home and tell your parents that I now know the Bible's full of contradictions, so I'm not going to go to church anymore. You know, it's not, the point is not the contradiction. The point is, if you see the contradiction, it makes you understand what this thing is that you're reading, that otherwise you think is one book. It shows that these are stories that are being told. The accounts of Genesis 1 and 2 are literary. They're not scientific treatises. They're not necessarily historical in the sense of things that really happened. They're stories that are trying to convey meaning. If you modernize them so they fit with modern science, or you harmonize them so that they fit together, you're robbing each of these stories of their own literary integrity, which means you're misinterpreting it. And if you think the Bible is valuable, then you probably should not want to misinterpret it, in my humble opinion. Implausibilities and contradictions actually help interpretation. They open up interpretation because you start seeing things you wouldn't see before, but you're not making stuff up now. You're seeing it in the text because you recognize what's going on in these texts.
Now, again, he's going going a step further than I would go, but from a hermeneutical standpoint, he's establishing basic rules of you do observation and you observe what's there. Difficulties, problems, sequencing problems, contradictions, tensions, disagreement, doesn't make any sense. How does this fit here? And you acknowledge that. Now, I believe you can acknowledge that, struggle with it, stumble through it, may not even come up with a good answer, but by faith still believe that the Bible is the inerrant, inspired word of God, and yet deal with the problems and the difficulties. And I don't think that means immediately saying, well, it never happened, it didn't happen, it didn't happen. I don't think we always have to jump to that conclusion unless all of our observational and then interpretive work leads us to go, I don't know if how we should understand this. So like the debate with Genesis 1 and 2 is what literary genre should it be classified as? Is it classified as a historical narrative? Does it function as a narrative? From a literary perspective, it doesn't even matter what you believe. Does it function as Hebrew poetry? If it functions as Hebrew poetry, does it have all of the attributes of Hebrew poetry? And if it does, then how should it be interpreted? Now, those are debates worth having, but Christians don't want to have those debates. Because you'll get labeled a Bible denier, a skeptic, and basically be tossed out, out of church. You can't do that. But in some cases, those are real discussions we have to have. You can observe, well, wait a minute. Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, it seems like two separate accounts. Why do we need two separate accounts? Oh, you can try to give a theological answer, but it may not work hermeneutically, from a literary standpoint, from a textual standpoint. It just may be a good theological argument you can place upon it and say, so that everyone will just move on. Those are questions you have to struggle with. There may not be easy answers, and you may come to an answer today, and guess what? The next time you look at it, you throw out those answers and you seek to look for information again, and you may come up to a different answer. All right, well, we'll get to a good stopping point, and then we'll be done.
So I'm going to give a bunch of examples, quick kind of hop, skip, and a jump through some examples with the New Testament.
Well, we found a place to stop. If he's going to start giving New Testament examples, well, then we'll wait till next time to look at the New Testament examples. All right? And so the greatest discovery is that, hey, we have 66 individual books, and we have to understand them as 66 individual books. And I will say we have to understand them first as 66 individual books, understanding who they're to, what's going on, what's happening, how the language is used, what literary genre it is, and trying to figure out what's going on within that book. Now, and sometimes it's okay to look at maybe if that author has written other books, to go to those other books to see how they use the same phrase, the same Greek, the same Hebrew word. Okay, now that's okay. If we can identify a book as it belongs to this literary genre, but there's 3 other books in the Old Testament of the same literary genre, then in some cases it's valuable to go see how that literary genre handles certain things in other places. Okay, that can be beneficial. But the main thing is keep the books separate. Now, from a theological standpoint, I'm not saying we don't ever understand that it's all written by God, but we have to hermeneutically start, whoa. That's one book to one people and one specific time. What's going on? What's the literary genre? What was that? Who was it to? What was going on? And trying to understand it that way. That's just basic good hermeneutics. The church has so destroyed that with this devotional mindset and this I've got to get a sermon out of it mindset. Now, I know inevitably now, we're going to have to do some work on Genesis 1 and 2. I think we're going to have to at some point. We'll have to do some work. Won't be pleasant, won't be easy, but we'll have to do some work. And again, just do your observational work. You can look for yourself to see the difficulties and the complexities and the tension. And you can, and there's nothing wrong with acknowledging that. And then you get to the after you acknowledge that, then you get to, well, wait a minute. What is going on here? What is the literary genre going? We've got to identify the genre. And we only have really two options: poetry or narrative. Well, how does it function? Okay. Now, if we come to a conclusion, now once we label it a certain literary genre based off facts, then we have to determine how does that kind of literary genre is interpreted, and then we can go figure out what happens. And again, we may go back and forth on that because we would have to ask the question, is there universal agreement on what literary genre it is? I would say there is definitely not universal agreement upon it, but I would be shocked to ever find universal agreement on anything because Christians can't literally agree on anything. But people who struggle with the text and try to figure it out should not be immediately labeled Satan and an enemy of the Bible. It can in many cases just be people trying their best to figure it out. And that's what we should all do. All right. Thanks for listening. Well, let's see. I'm going to go look here really quick just to see how we did tonight. All right, well, North Carolina, 3 people. Thank you so very much. Texas, 2 people. Both of them are me. And then I knew Canada would show up. It's almost midnight, and British Columbia showed up. So I really do appreciate that. Thank you so very much. North Carolina and Canada. I appreciate it. All right. Everyone have a wonderful night, morning, whatever time it may be, wherever you may be. And we'll finish Bart Ehrman's farewell address hopefully tomorrow. We've only got, I think we still got almost 40 minutes left. It's a long farewell lecture. So, and we'll get through it. But we have now figured out what he thinks is the greatest discovery in biblical scholarship, and that's understanding that the Bible is 66 individual books. I agree with that hermeneutically, right? But I also would not stop where he stops, because I also believe, obviously, the Bible's inspired by God. So yeah, there would be some differences there. But his bringing up some of those issues with Genesis 1 and 2, all Christians should be willing to struggle with those things, and it should not be a shock to hear someone say that. It shouldn't be, because these are things Christianity has known forever. All right, thanks for listening. Everyone have a great evening. God bless.